Welcome back to the ongoing Sharpe's TV series program movie review. Last week we covered Sharpe's Rifles, the first of the Sharpe miniseries. Um, on with was it Apostolic Majesty and Wandering Panda. Um, Overall, I think the consensus was that it was a fairly decent its first entry, but the best of the movies was yet to come, and I believe Wandering Panda said that this was his favorite episode out of the entire miniseries. Um, for today, though, we are covering Sharpe's Eagle, the second entry. Um, and I'm here with Alex, that Steam guy, and hopefully we will be joined by Charlemagne as soon as he can hop onto the stream. Seems like he's a little bit tied up at work with work at the moment, but he'll join us a little bit later. How are you doing, Alex?
Hello, yes. Oh, good morning, I suppose. Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you.
So we were chatting a little bit behind the scenes about the Sharp series, I guess, as a whole, and how we actually came to discover this series. And you were telling me something that, as an American, I wouldn't exactly know. But what exactly was the ITV channel that
Yeah,
the series like was actually programmed on?
yeah. So the history of British television really is that it was always under the BBC. It was an extension of when they had the radio, and then they started the television channels. And it was back in the 50s, I think it was. Um, they started up a non-government sponsored uh, television channel, and ITV literally just stands for Independent Television. It was quite regional. It was done by commercials, but in the UK, ITV has got a bit of a reputation for doing sort of literary adaptations, big feature-length episodes of things. They're very famous for doing things like Midsummer Murders. They've done a lot of the Agatha Christie novels, Poirot, and all the rest of it. So
Well, I think
Sharp
you
fit
left
right
out
into
the
that.
best of the series, which is, of course, the Hornblower miniseries that I previously covered on a longer live stream last December. Absolutely brilliant series, and I've my wife personally absolutely loves the the Poirot series. Um, you know, nothing but gold coming out of them. But as a Brit, were they somewhat overplayed at all,
No,
or
I don't think it was overplayed. It was the ITV drama is sort of rainy Saturday afternoon telly. It's that's the niche it fits, and you never get bored of them. You go, oh yes, this is one I've seen many times, and sit down on a Saturday afternoon after the rugby, or after a Sunday lunch with a cup of tea, and fall asleep to the wonderful David Suchet as Hercule Poirot, everybody's favourite Belgian,
would,
and watch that.
would this be sort of like the equivalent of like an American B movie or like a sort of stereotypical dad movie kind of thing?
Yeah,
Um,
very much. It comes through in Sharp, but it's in the other ones. There is a stock cast of actors who you will see popping up. In fact, Poirot, of course, his number two. Oh, what's his name? It'll come to me. But he,
um, I'll
after
look
this,
it up real quick.
yeah, it begins with an H. But the actor who plays that will become the Duke of Wellington after this episode. So the chap currently playing the Duke of Wellington in Sharpe's Rifles and Sharpe's Eagle left after those two episodes, and the chap who plays the Duke of Wellington after that is the same guy who plays Poirot's sidekick. So he had a very busy 1990s.
Huh. Like I was doing a little bit of research onto, I guess, what the set was like. Uh, in the filming of and production of Sharp to these first two movies, and it seemed quite hellish. Uh,
Yeah,
being filmed in Ukraine in the early 1990s, post-Soviet collapse, um, absolute mess, a ton of horse and animal abuse. Um, like it does look like war-torn Spain because this is like impoverished, you know, post-war torn like Ukraine. Um, but one of the more notable aspects is the Duke of Wellington's nose, and
yes,
it's quite prominent. Like I didn't really notice it too much in the last episode, but for Sharp's eagle, it's really obvious how beaky they made. You know, the Duke of Wellington's nose. Um, it's also somewhat comical that in real life, production had to keep the nose on ice in a lockbox between takes and between dressing sessions because of how sort of prominent it is and how much time they spend actually working on Wellington's nose. I
yeah,
think it did him a little bit dirty, giving him such a beaky nose and a little unibrow. Um, I don't.
yes. It's one of those things. Apparently, it would. There are a couple of scenes, and I was watching the episode. I watched it last night, not closely. I was cooking at the time, and then I watched it more closely tonight after dinner. There are a couple of scenes where you can just start to see it flecking around, particularly across the bridge of his nose. You notice it, but I think he was probably so hot and sweaty and bothered by that he just couldn't. Yeah, no more takes, chaps. That's it. We'll go with this one. It'll be fine. And that's kind of British like telly drama all over. Is cheap sets, minimal extras, questionable costume choices. There's the Colonel, who's sort of Trump's Sharp's advocate on Wellesley's staff. I noticed he looks like he's got like dressmaker's lines across his tunic.
Are you talking about Hogan?
No, not Hogan. The chap in the Colonel in who's on Wellesley's staff, sort of his secretary.
I'm not sure who you're talking about.
Colonel Lawford. That was his name. I've
Lawford.
got this. Yeah, Lawford. If you look at his tunic, it looks like it's got dressmaker's lines, which look they're sort
Hmm.
of very equally spaced. It looks like that's where braiding was going to go, but the costume department didn't get it there in time.
Hmm. Well, I figure we're talking about various characters on the actual movie. I figure we should actually start getting into the plot just a little bit. So you watched the first episode, right? Sharp's Rifles. Just
Yeah.
getting into the series. Um, did you have any initial takes on, I guess, where we're starting from? I did discuss this with sort of Charlemagne a few days ago, like what we thought of it. But did you have any particular takes from that episode?
No, not really. I don't think. I know. Again, in the sort of background, Sean Bean was never supposed to be Sharp. It was supposed to be somebody else. And he was sort of called in at the last minute. I think because the first guy got food poisoning or something like that. Again, from the terrible set, the terrible terrible backstage they had.
It was
Um,
it was Michael Byrne who
yes,
is also known for being it was like lieutenant. It was from the Hornblower miniseries. He played um, shoot, it's was it? I forget what his name was, but he suffered from a soccer or football injury
ah,
on
yes,
set,
that was it.
and
Yeah,
that's um, why Bean's jacket is so tight because it was fitted for a slightly slimmer, taller actor.
yes,
Which is why his jacket is almost comically just popping out every once in a while.
yeah. Not that any of the women watching mind too much.
No, and we have a few nice well, a little bit of femme fodder in terms of light romance going on throughout the series, I guess. Um, with who's the female gorilla? What was her name? Um,
Teresa.
Teresa. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if she's in the next few episodes, but you know, I don't I don't think I mind her now as much as I thought she kind of intruded on the first episode as
Hmm.
sort of heroine, but um I don't know. Uh so just to set the stage for Sharpe's Eagle, right? Where this is, I believe it was like 1809. Uh, Arthur Wellesley is, or General Wellesley is leading the British Expeditionary Army to combat the Spanish at some conclusive battle in the near future, the Battle of Talavera, and he is he has this officer that is sort of foisted upon him. Was it Colonel Simmerson, who is the sort of arrogant, pompous, disciplinarian who's also incompetent. But Simmerson is there to spy on Wellesley um, and to portray Wellesley in such a bad light. So rather than, I guess, give Simmerson something bad to write about him while in camp and in preparation for this battle, he orders Simmerson and Sharpe to go on this sort of little small heroic journey to blow up a bridge where the French are maneuvering their troops through around Talavera. And we're reintroduced to Sharpe, and Sharpe's not really in too good of a position. Um, was I don't recall, but was he injured in the last at the end of the last movie?
I don't think he is. Um, I seem to remember that this is just sort of some nondescript off-camera knee injury. Um, I'll probably have to go and rewatch the first one again. But no, I don't think it is as a result. It's not immediately after um, that one because, of course,
Yeah,
he's worried that although he's been made a lieutenant, that's not going to stick. So he needs some other role. But as well, of course, his regiment, the 95th Rifles, are being cycled out the line, as I say. So they are bound for Lisbon. But Major Hogan ensures that him and the chosen men, our band of main characters, are kept back for his personal use, effectively, with the engineering corps, and they're linked into the South Essex, who are a plot regiment. They weren't actually at Talavera, but they are used in this. And as we go through the series of episodes, Sharpe sort of being attached to the South Essex becomes a recurring theme, and he develops his character within that regiment. So yeah, they turn up late to a parade. The colonel is Colonel Simmerson, who is now being set up as the one of the key baddies. There's a great cast throughout the whole 12 episode run, and even into the other two in India, of reoccurring villains, and Simmerson is one of the key ones. He is Wellesley refers to him as a coffee house fop. He is obviously from money. He has a lot of breeding, but very little intelligence. He's pompous. He's quite cruel as well. He doesn't spare the lash on his troops. He makes them wear a stockade. It's like a leather chin strap to keep your chin up, which digs into the troops' necks. That comes back a number of times as a sign of a bad officer, forcing them to wear stocks. He marches his troops even though they've got heat exhaustion. Some of them collapse. That wasn't uncommon, unfortunately. And his host of officers which will come to Gibbon. Is it Gibbon? I'm going to get all the names wrong now.
So you have Colonel Simmerson, who is a sort of aged, incompetent. Of course, he has his nepotistic nephew Gibbons, and his sort of toady Lieutenant Barry, and they're accompanied by two other people. Captain Leroy, who is an American with a sort of nondescript accent. It's not. He says he's a Virginian loyalist from the American Revolutionary War, although he does not have a Tidewater Virginian accent. It's more of a sort of I don't know how to describe it. It's a sort of facsimile of different Southern accents, but it's not Virginian. Um, to the
Well,
keen-eared among you. Yep.
he says his dad fought in the Revolutionary War, and then he was exiled, and it never says where to. So it's entirely possible that they can cover for the facsimile of a Southern accent by saying, yeah, he left Virginia when he was a boy, and he's been living in the Caribbean on one of the Sugar Islands ever since. So yeah, he's got a bit of an accent, but it's not a proper one.
Yeah, the sort of Tidewater Virginian gentleman accent, sometimes called it's like I forget what it was called. It's not like Southern gentleman. It's some sort of type of gentleman speak, where you end up with very brief but sort of like Lacedaemonian, laconic sort of phraseology, and then communicating half with nods and gestures, and leaving things completely unsaid. But this is a sort of stereotypical American among Brits, and also in Simmerson's attaché is Major Lennox, who is a very competent man who recognizes Sharpe from some previous engagement that they had in India, and it's clear that that Sharpe has immediate sort of an immediate connection to Lennox as a sort of fellow seasoned veteran, while he has nothing but contempt for these other sort of nepotistic officers who don't really deserve to be there. I did somewhat enjoy Simmerson's like sort of what are they called, like malapropisms, where he's like, oh, it is natural to be in war in nature, or that would be a tautology.
Yeah.
It's there. Like Simmerson is, I'm very grateful that he's going to be in future episodes because he's such a despicable character.
Oh yeah, he's not the worst baddie in the whole set. Not wishing to spoil them, in terms of just being evil. But he's a wonderful bad guy. There's so many avenues that the plot can go with how awful he is as a human being. Mostly he's a sort of self-aggrandizing, pompous, vindictive character, but then he's also a coward. When we actually finally get to the Battle of Talavera, right at the end, the French appear out of the gunsmoke, and he just immediately turns tail and runs. That's one of his key traits going forward. So he'll always talk a good game, but actually run from the fight when it matters.
Right, and he also has extremely high expectations for his soldiers, but never actually follows through with any sort of compensatory leadership. Like in the chat, someone says, 3 rounds a minute. Simmerson sort of challenges Sharpe to drill this company into firing at least 3 shots a minute, which is something that he doesn't really believe that Sharpe can do. But with a little bit of Georgie, you know, um, you know, perspiration, they're able to train the men into efficiently loading 3 shots a minute.
Yeah.
Um,
So you got to remember this is 1993, so we do everything through a montage. So yeah, the wailing electric guitar comes out, and there's a montage of them all firing, and with some questionable musketry practice, they managed to get 3 rounds a minute off. There's one particular soldier called Dodds, who's a sort of extra plus recurring character throughout the episode. He manages to get 4 off in a minute, which is possible but difficult. Yes, the way the tapping the butt of the musket on the ground method of loading, I have seen YouTube videos of people doing it, and it does work for the first sort of couple of shots, and then it stops working.
that just it almost like looks like it's begging for there to be some sort of misfire if you're if you're tapping the butt of the gun like that. But I'm not sure what the mechanics actually look like. I guess in real life, if you'd actually want to test that out. Um, but you know, as we're as Sharpe succeeds in this challenge from Simmerson, he and Simmerson's regiment and the chosen men riflemen end up on route to blow up this bridge because Wellington figures, hey, let's give Simmerson the spy on him something to actually report and have him report like some minor victory in sabotaging the enemy's logistics. And if Simmerson, if something bad happens to Simmerson, he can also take all the blame as well. So along the way, Sharpe is reunited with the love interest from the last episode, the sort of guerrilla, the Spanish guerrilla, Teresa, and they end up reuniting. And there's also this sort of countess who is the sort of upstart who is unable to actually pay her own maids, and there was some, some I guess conflict between the expectations of Simmerson and for having I guess aristocratic leadership when he's when at his sides are upstart lowborn Richard Sharpe and this countess who is also lowborn but was fortunate enough to get a title of nobility in Spain. um, so it's this sort of interesting little I guess juxtaposition. It might almost be too slanted in the direction of the competent upstarts versus the incompetent aristocrats who are also somewhat delusional and inebriated.
Yeah, they're there because they bought their commission, and they have friends in high places. So yes, along the way we also have Sharpe sort of joshing with the other officers, so they are at the back of the column and get told to not dawdle in the back. So they double time past the column way off into the distance, and then stop and have lunch, waiting for them all to catch up. There's also the bit they turn up at an apple cart, but it turns out the apple cart is actually a gun run for the guerrillas, which is when they reconvene with Teresa, and they all end up at this camp at the bridge across the Tagus River, where they meet up with the Spanish to blow it up in the morning. Simmerson, then there's a whole bit. Hogan has this joke that I think he's got 30 bob on Simmerson talking continuously for an hour with Captain Leroy, and obviously Hogan, being a good Irishman, is sort of, he keeps feeding him things, so he keeps talking, so he can win his bet. All the other officers get absolutely hammered, and Gibbons and Berry play cards. There's an implication that Berry cheats at cards, but he never gets caught because Gibbon keeps losing, and it's at this point we really see that Berry is a really nasty piece of work, who is semi-extorting sex out of the Countess's maids, and using that as a way to get to the Countess, who, yeah, as you say, has got money worries. Sharpe intervenes to protect the honour of the Countess, and they have a bit of a dust-up in the camp overnight, but fortunately it's all out in the open, and it gets stopped, and Captain Leroy hands Sharpe the money to hand to the Countess to pay her servants, putting him in his debt, but also setting Leroy up as a decent fellow. But then, of course, when he asks where's the money from, he just says slaves, cotton, and molasses. Obviously, 1809 is the year slavery is abolished in the Empire. So this was quite a hot topic then.
Somewhat ironic.
Yes,
and morally questionable even at the time.
Even at the time, yeah. Although, of course, we abolished the slave trade just by buying off the slave holders. So yes, he would have been quids in at that exact moment.
Yeah, and there was also a few jabs at Leroy where he's okay whipping slaves, but he's not okay being a disciplinarian for regular English, yeah, for Brit soldiers. Although I really didn't end up with too much of too much antipathy towards his character. He just seems like exactly as he presents. He's just a somewhat competent officer who just so happens to be this son of an American loyalist. But he acts competently. I don't understand why they didn't just blow up the bridge, as soon as they found it. That's what they were ordered to do. Like, why would they like dilly-dally and not at least somewhat sabotage it?
Yeah,
I
think
know.
that's to set Simmerson up as an incompetent field commander. So the a tiny French patrol of 4 musketmen come over the hill, and he sends Major Lennox, the guard, and the colours over to the other side of the bridge, and they go up the other side, fire a volley at the skirmishers, and it turns out they're actually backed up by French hussars. So the hussars come in on infantry in line with recently unloaded muskets, and they get cut up. Obviously, Sharpe and the chosen men run across the bridge to try and pick up a couple of cavalrymen and do what they can to help. Captain Leroy goes over as well, as does this young guy called Mr. Denny, who they never actually say what his rank is, but I imagine he's a sergeant, to try and help. In the altercation, Major Lennox is killed, or mortally wounded, I suppose, defending the colours. The French go off with the King's colours, so the regimental colours are stolen, and in his dying breath, Lennox tells Sharpe that in compensation he wants an imperial eagle, and when he gets it, to push the brass end of the eagle into his grave so he can feel it.
I mean, that was well, there are a few takes. One, I think, is just watching the episode. It's very obvious where the budgetary limitations are. Like, there are like 15, 20 hussars, and the entire regiment that Sharpe and Simmerson are leading is like 40 regulars and like a dozen riflemen that you can see in the entire shot. Um, it's it's better when they don't show everyone all at once, because once they do, it's very obvious. You know, these are 60 ex-Ukrainian army dudes like wandering around in the steppe.
Mm.
Um, but when it's up close, it's a lot more intimate, and you can't really tell, um, how many people are on the field at any one point.
Yeah,
But you know, Simmerson makes this mistake. He tries to chase 4 musketmen, ends up getting, a cavalry ambushed by cavalry. Although it seems like these hussars just ran right into their volleys. I don't know why they weren't able to put up an immediate fight. They just kind of turned and ran. And then, like you said, Simmerson turned and ran, and then tried to blow up the bridge as Sharpe was trying to rescue, this detachment. Um, and then, as soon as they get back to HQ, Simmerson reports to Wellesley that, uh, oh yeah, his nephew put up quite a good fight, um, and you know they're just completely overwhelmed, and he blew up the bridge, after sustaining no casualties, and it was
yeah,
all quite heroic. But Hogan is right there. Like, how could he expect to like get away with the loss of an eagle of the colors when all these officers would have to lie for Simmerson? Like, how could he expect to get away with all of this? I don't know. I don't
yeah.
know.
It's one of those things of he's expecting his social position to cover him. Um, so yeah, it's a bit of a caricature of what Bernard Cromwell thinks the English aristocracy are like. But yeah, essentially, he's hoping that his position and influence back at Horse Guards can massage the official war records to assist his family and his nephew Gibbons, to get Gibbons a promotion from lieutenant up to captain. This obviously doesn't work, and he gets chewed out by Wellesley. Hogan, in fact, when it happens at the battlefield, just tells him to take a pistol and go and unalive himself behind a tent. But obviously he doesn't do that. So
So I
yeah,
have to
it's
ask, what exactly is the significance of the eagle and the king's colors? Um,
so
is Yeah.
yeah, so they make a big thing that the eagle has been touched by the hand of Napoleon, and the colours have been touched by the hand of the king. The regimental colours represent not only they've got two, which is one is the regimental flag and one is the Union flag. And the Union flag obviously represents the king personally, and the regimental flag represents everybody in the regiment and its entire history and battle honours and all the rest of it. So the loss of either one is a sort of personal disgrace to the men of that regiment. And actually, if you go, this really extends even up into the American Civil War, where the casualty rates among people bearing flags was absolutely appalling, because they were quite easy to take a bead on, and would often get picked off by the opposing infantry regiment. But because they represented the honour of that body of men, if one colour bearer would fall, the guy next to him immediately picked up the colours and kept going, and then he'd get picked off, and then so they'd all try and clamour to get it. In fact, a bit of trivia: I think when Napoleon was finally defeated in 1814, after the retreat, after the disaster at Leipzig, he had something like 6,000 standards and colours from all his various campaigns. and as a last act of defiance before the Allied forces entered Paris, was he piled them all up in the courtyard outside the Elysee and had them all burned.
I'm trying to find like a little picture of this. Like it's almost hard to imagine that many standards, like one per regiment. It's astonishing.
Yeah, but then that was the attitude towards warfare back then. It was a very very different way of doing things to us. Interestingly, I was reading about the differences, as you say, the limitations of a nascent TV series versus the books. And in the book, one, the bridge is an old Roman stone bridge, not a wooden one, and two, that battle is actually between a couple of hundred men on each side.
Hmm.
Yeah, it still doesn't go very well for the Brits, but in that engagement, Richard Sharpe ends up taking a French gun, an artillery piece.
Hmm.
But obviously, because of the limitations of the
Budgetary,
budget,
yeah.
that got completely written out. So yeah, they had to make some concessions. And you're right, when they pan out and you realise it's only sort of 30 blokes, it's not brilliant. But when they zoom in and you sort of all the chaotic camera angles, it's amazing what they can do to generate an atmosphere with so little.
Yeah, and you know, if you're just watching on like a small screen, I'm sure it doesn't really have as much of a jarring effect. Um, and even like later on, when we actually get to the Battle of Talavera, I think it's almost shown a lot better. Where um, like you can never quite see all the dudes in the periphery because they're all sort of spaced out,
Mm.
and the camera doesn't go so wide as to like expose you to the outer limits of where the actors are. Um, but going forward from the loss of the king's colors, um, and Wellesley chewing out Simmerson. Um, there's a sort of final confrontation between like Simmerson is somewhat sent to the back of the or he's sent to a different position of the column for the upcoming battle and in humiliation, and he kind of goads his little minion Barry into starting a duel with Sharpe, and he does try to start this duel by trying to whip the countess, in this absurdly brazen gesture, and then naturally, Sharpe, you know, Sharpe rescues her and places her under her protection, and you know, Leroy bails him out, and financially puts her under Sharpe's protection, um, and to sort of resolve this issue where Sharpe and Barry really want to duel each other. Wolsey has this great idea. Let's just put them out on night patrol together so that they won't have a chance to duel. Well, what was he thinking? Like, okay, you put two guys who want to kill each other right next to each other for a whole night, and problem solved. I, I,
Yeah,
I,
yeah, it works exactly as intended. Him and Hogan are speaking in sort of double entendres and things that aren't technically against regulations. So well, I send them out, and if anything should happen, well, that would be very terrible. But it gives them the opportunity to go and one of them to go and die gloriously. Um,
well, I don't think that they're like. I don't think the intention was for them, like one of them. Well, yeah, if there was a patrol and one of them happened to die under somewhat sketchy circumstances, oh yeah, he died a hero's death. I I think what if the patrol didn't come into any opposition and they just someone had an accident, um, a very convenient accident for one of the offending parties. You know, I it just seems sort of absurd that this general is you know
Yeah,
is
micromanaging the feuds between his junior officers.
yeah, and it's also somewhat we talked about it on the last episode, but Wellington knowing the names of all these little lieutenants, and he's like his right hand man is seemingly this major, this engineering major, and Simmerson is this colonel, but he he leads like 60 guys around, and there are like no other officers or oh, no other high ranking officers around. Like they
Yeah,
couldn't at least have like one or two lower ranking generals you know
yeah. I
badgering
don't. I
Wellington.
think
I don't
there's
know.
yeah. There's Wellesley, and then there's nobody below him until you get to the colonel. There's about three colonels, I think. But yeah, it's there's like the worst shot in the whole film is when they show the South Essex marching to the bridge, and it is about 60 blokes. Which is massively overstaffed when it's got a colonel, was it three lieutenants, a captain, and a major. That's a bit
Yeah.
excessive.
Um. Yeah. It's yeah.
But
You're right. Yeah.
it was only episode two of
Two
a TV
majors,
series they didn't think was going to be a success.
a colonel, two majors, a captain, three lieutenants, and
Sergeant Harper,
a
somehow.
lieutenant for the rifles, and a named sergeant. Like it's very top heavy. It's almost like the British Admiralty today when it comes to admirals versus number of ships.
Yes.
Um, unfortunately, um, but just keep going. We end up with this patrol that actually does come into contact with the enemy, and wouldn't you know it, Barry tries to kill Sharpe in the middle of the battle,
Yeah.
but Sharpe's good buddy Harper is able to choke out Barry and accidentally kill him. I think it's an accident. I don't think he intended to kill him, but Barry ends up dead, and this beef is somewhat quashed as the very next morning, the Battle of Talavera actually gets started.
Yeah.
Um,
It feels by that point, because I don't know about you watching that, the altercation, the night action with the French is very small, and it just sort of stops. But you look at it; it's 100-minute runtime, and I think because I was watching it on YouTube, so you get the timer at the bottom. I think the night action is you're about 78 minutes in. So you've been going up to this whole battle. You've got to tie up the loose ends, have the big battle scene and the crescendo, and then do the setup for the next episode in about 20 minutes. And it all starts getting, because of course Barry dies, and there's still shooting going on in the background. And they go, "Oh yeah, well chuck him in with the French pickets, and we'll say he died gloriously." And then it just cuts to the battle in the morning after. It's a bit like actually at the bridge, because of course when they finish the battle at the bridge, Sharpe, his guys, Mr. Denny, and Captain Leroy with his horse are all on the wrong side of the river. And they go, "Well, you've just blown up the bridge." And then they go, "And then they were back at HQ." It's like, oh, okay.
yeah,
I guess they swam.
they just teleported. But yeah, then we like the actual Battle of Talavera is kind of, I don't know. It's kind of sweet where you know Sharpe dresses his guys down, asks like who's actually been in a battle before. It's gonna be chaotic. You're gonna hear shots from every which way and every angle. Your job is just to do what I trained you to do and fire three rounds a minute, and until you don't hear the enemy anymore, and then go ahead and advance. And that's exactly what happens, right? You have this column of Frenchmen advance. Simmerson, being the coward that he is, loses his nerve and and retreats, while Leroy is able to hold his men in place. Meanwhile, Sharpe and his riflemen, after shooting off a few volleys, prepares to flank the French column in this very small little action. And in the midst of this battle, um, you know, the British company is able to drop this column and then route them. And in the chaos, Sharpe is able to secure a French eagle, which very sentimentally he is able to plant at Lennox's grave, um, which kind of ties up this nice little story. Um, I it's I think it's very it's a fairly decent overall battle scene. I'd say it's filmed just close and tight enough so that you can't see the budgetary limits. Um, but at the same time, you could feel like a certain scale and a certain amount of, I guess, very like intimate violence going on. I don't know. It just kind of worked for me, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is a really good battle sequence. As you say, one of the clever things is like when the French come on, they put the cameraman in the column, so you can't see its edges. You can see the front couple of ranks, and then you assume it goes on behind.
Hmm.
So and keeping the camera tight. And when they show the British volley, you end on, but quarter turned in, so you can't see how far the line goes.
Hmm.
Um, the two French artillery pieces on. Yeah, there we are.
Yeah,
That's the whole regiment.
yeah. This is the full half of the column being officers, and then a guy on like a little apple cart in the back, and
Yeah,
then
his little trailer
like
full of gunpowder.
30 officers, and then yeah, here are like 12 chosen men at the front. Absolutely perfect. Um, and this is to be juxtaposed with like tight lines. Um, the formations are so tight, and the actual shots are so tight that you can't really see beyond the 6 or 10 guys that are in the actual cast. Um, so I think it all sort of ends in a very satisfying way. The arcs are all complete. Lennox had his vindication and honor restored. Sharpe is able to. I don't think he'll continue to be a captain because of what happened with Barry. Um, but he proved himself to be quite a leading officer of this company. Um, the Countess is handed off to Leroy, while Sharpe does his own sort of thing after this.
Yeah,
Um,
but I don't know about you, but it felt watching it like they were playing Leroy and the Countess as a love story.
I
Just in that final like couple of minutes when they do the we're off now, and there's a slight implication from the body language and the way they say it as if they're going off together. And it's also a bit weird that he's a commissioned officer in the British Army. And he's like, yeah, I've had one battle, I'm off now. Bye. It's like, I don't think that's how it works, mate.
No, like, and there are some very crass statements about relationships from the officers in the army, um, particularly referring to the Countess and how easily chipped off her maids are. Um, but you know, our own Sharpe is a red-blooded man, and he has his own tryst with the gorilla lady, Teresa. Um, everything sort of ends on a fairly optimistic note with Sharpe getting exactly what he wanted. He gets vindication and redemption. Simmerson is a coward who slinks off to whatever next episode he shows up in, and it sounds like uh, is Leroy actually coming back, or is he just a one-off character?
No, he's a one-off character. Unfortunately, I always
Mhm.
thought that was a bit of a shame, actually, because he is a good character. I think he's quite an interesting one, and they could have played about with it. But he, being feature-length episodes, you do tend to get these characters who, yeah, appear once and then are very integral to that episode, and then never appear again. Um, One of the things, if you've seen anything about the background dramas, is that yeah, Brian Cox, Major Hogan, saw one of the Ukrainian staffers maltreat a horse on set, and he railed on the guy, and apparently the food was atrocious, and the catering, the sleeping arrangements were awful. So after 2 episodes, he went, "Look, I can't do this anymore," um, and terminated his contract. So the Hogan character remains, but it's in like 3 or 4 different people from now on. So these first 2 episodes, and it's telling on the ITV playlist, because all the episodes are available on the ITV's YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
The first 2, so this one and Sharpe's Rifles, are called Series 1, and it's Series 1, Episode 1, and Series 1, Episode 2, and then the next one, which I think is Sharpe's Company, is Series 2. So there is, I think after these 2, they went, oh, actually, this is quite popular, and we could make a success of this, and they chucked quite a lot more money at it. But that's why the first 2 episodes have this really sort of charming, quite small, cheap, slightly unsure of itself feel about them.
Well, are you saying that we get a little bit drowned out in production value and
It
charm in
goes
the
up a
next few
bit.
episodes?
It goes up a bit. The production value goes up. I think the director changes as well. And yeah, the guy playing Wellesley changes. I'm pretty sure it's Hector. Is
All right, just
is
looking at the casting. Oh shoot, just gonna scroll down. But yeah, Hogan is only in the first 2, but um, let's see, Wellington
it's
looks like he
Hugh Fraser. Yeah,
Hugh Fraser. Hmm. But it actually looks like Hugh Fraser just keeps on going as Wellington for the next few episodes. Huh. Well, it
I
looks
don't know.
like.
'Cause it's definitely not Hugh Fraser in the first 2, so that's wrong. It's David Troughton is Wellington in the first 2 episodes.
All right, hold on. So someone needs to edit this. Oh, okay. So it looks like.
You just can't trust Wikipedia. This is a problem.
Wait, what do you mean? Like Wikipedia is like incomplete?
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of
What is
cool.
the internet going to do?
I don't know. But it does look like the next 3 episodes are part of this like second series, and I don't know. I've had a very enjoyable time, watching these sort of cozy Napoleonic streams or episodes. Uh, this type of thing would never actually be made today, due to various sort of diversity requirements and due to a sort of general lack of interest from the general public itself, I'd imagine. But looking back at these like 90s series like Sharp or Hornblower, it there's a certain sense of nostalgia, but there's also a sort of certain sense of, tragedy and loss that we don't really get this type of content anymore. But sitting back and enjoying it for what it is, I had a pretty fun time watching Sharpe's Eagle. A massive step up from Sharpe's Rifles, in my opinion. Um, do you know what we're in for Sharpe's company? Is it going to be
Oh, I'm gonna have to
better or
remind myself
worse?
now.
Hmm?
Um,
Let's see. I don't want
so,
to spoil
yes, the siege of
too much for
Butterhalf, I
myself.
think.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil too.
Yes. So Sharpe's Eagle is 1809, and then Sharpe's Company is set in 1812. So it's in Wellesley's final push through Spain. Because if people know anything about the Peninsular War, it can really be seen as sort of three phases. There's the initial phase in 1807, 1808, which is the Brits turn up, don't do very well, and the retreat to Corunna, which is like a Napoleonic Dunkirk. Then there's the first foray from Lisbon. They get a bit into Spain, get all the way back to Lisbon. French realise they can't take Lisbon. That's that one. And then there's this foray, which is out from the Portuguese border. They do actually get up into around Madrid, can't hold it, get back to the Spanish border. And then finally, in 12 and 13, I think it is, there's the final push through where they actually kick Joseph off the throne, and then they push up all the way through into France. And by the time Napoleon is exiled, they're somewhere around Bordeaux, I think. The epic history, all parts of Napoleonic War series, which is like 5.5 hours long, is the best reference material for that. So if you've got an afternoon spare, just go and watch that because it's brilliant.
Well, in terms of final comments, as this show that I have right now is technically the sort of pregame show for Old Glory Club's Pony Express Radio, which I think should be premiering pretty soon. The guys sometimes, just like me, premiere a few minutes late due to certain guests. But yeah, do you have any sort of final thoughts with regards to this episode before we head out for the night?
No, I can see why it's a very, very popular one. It's competently put together. It's a good plot line. Daniel Craig's in it, baby Daniel Craig, which and plays an absolutely spectacular bastard, which is always a crowd pleaser. There he is. I think this is like his 7th acting credit on IMDb. So yeah, he's a baby there.
Yeah, he looks very smarmy and
Yeah,
really
oily.
petulant. Yeah, he's someone. We had someone professionally grease him up for this role.
Yeah, proper nasty piece of work.
Oh,
So
there's a good mugshot right there.
It really does set it up. Sharpe's Company is a decent one. Sharpe's Enemy, which is the one after that, is the famous one because that's the one with Liz Hurley in it.
Oh my!
A young Liz Hurley. Where yes, my favourite one though is actually Sharpe's Regiment, which is a long way down the line, which is not actually set in Spain. So that's an interesting one. That's actually my favourite, I think, of them all. But I won't say anything more about it, so not to spoil it for you.
Well, I appreciate I appreciate you being able to make it onto this episode. Unfortunately, Charlemagne is experiencing a few different health issues, keeping him from coming onto the show. But um, glad to have you on, and your insight as a Brit. I always appreciate torturing the Brits just a little bit with sleep deprivation. It seems to bring out the wit in you guys.
Yeah, we just go back to the default programming. That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and I will see everybody in the audience next week, same time, Thursday, 7 p.m. EST, where we're going to go over Sharpe's Company. Someone in the audience said that Company is his favorite of them all, but we'll see about that. I'm still waiting to hear back from. Well, I haven't confirmed the two guests I'm having on next week, but I'll post those on Twitter as soon as I nail down the exact lineup. So thank you all for tuning in, and see you guys next week.
Bye all.